Wall of Voodoo really started when Mark Moreland, the guitar player, and I first met at a place called The Mask, which was the kind of legendary underground punk palace underneath the Pussycat Theater in Hollywood. Mark and I got together and started just playing as a duo. And as that started, Mark's brother Bruce came into it, and it started to evolve into something that people wanted us to play some shows someplace. We finally did, and we really didn't know what to call ourselves. There was a phrase that I'd been kicking around called Wall of Voodoo that came about from Mark and I trying to do these Phil Spector-like recordings. I would use all these rhythm machines overdubbed several times. A good friend of mine, Joe Ramirez, who now plays bass in my band, was there one night, and I'd said, "Gee, Joe, this really is the wall of sound, isn't it?" And Joe had said, "No, it's more like a wall of voodoo." Mexican Radio was a song written by myself and Mark Moreland, the guitar player in Wall of Voodoo. We used to go to rehearsal all the time and hear these Mexican radio stations coming across the border, and sometimes they'd kind of waft in and out. Mark had this phrase, "I'm on a Mexican radio." The instrumentation on that song is made up of a lot of pieces of old junk that we'd collected as a band, things from cocktail lounges and old rhythm machines and old sequencers. The sound on the front of Mexican Radio is done by a kind of antiquated old sequencer that actually we'd plugged in wrong and kicked it around the room a little bit so that it had that particular sound that begins the record. We did the song in a weekend. When we finished it, I remember thinking, like, this really might get played. Stewart Copeland from The Police called me up. He had come into an opportunity to do a soundtrack for a Francis Ford Coppola film called Rumblefish and needed a song for the end titles. So I worked on some things on the road, but I didn't really have it finished when finally it came time to do the tune. So Stewart locked me in this drum booth and wouldn't let me out till I was finished. So I was in there kind of stringing together metaphorical fish couplets, and Stewart was really helpful with that because I would slip them under the door while he was doing something else, and he would say either yes or no. It all happened so quick, I didn't really know if I even liked it. Stewart thought it was great, but I'd convinced Stewart that maybe I could do a better vocal, maybe I could write better words, so why don't you ship me the 24-track tape, and I'll go into a studio and see if I can better it. That was a mistake. I proceeded to erase the whole vocal off of it and put this new vocal on it. And then Stewart called me back up and said, "Stan, what are you doing? You're blowing it for me. They liked the other one. Where's the other one?" And I said, "Well, I erased it." And then there's a large groan over the phone and stuff. Luckily, Stewart had made a little work mix of the original Rumblefish tune on a cassette. And that's what you hear on the record. I started work on my first solo record called The Big Heat. I built my own studio to do the record in, and that was in an office not far from the old Wall of Voodoo offices on Hollywood Boulevard. It was quite a discovery for me because I really was going off on what I considered to be a kind of a self-indulgent solo career, and I would have no one to argue with now at all, but I ended up arguing with myself and other aspects of myself over what the record was going to be, and records pretty much have a life of their own, and they take on their own personality. The song Drive, She Said, came about first by a little device I'd built for myself that I'd always wanted to put into a song, which was a car horn. In my bedroom in Hollywood, I had this car horn set up, and it was hooked up to a dry cell battery. So every morning I would get up and I'd hit this car horn and kind of battle with the neighbors over their noises and stuff. And then I'd go to my little music corner and see what would come out. And one morning this just kind of popped out, this part of the lick. The song came about from there. I came back from Australia on the last leg of our world tour with Chapter 11, my band. And I looked through my suitcase because I knew it was time for a new record. And I don't really write songs on the road as much as I make notes. So on one page I found this note that said, "Write a screenplay." And I thought, well, that's probably a pretty good place to start in making a record. I wanted the new record to come from all of one place. I wanted to evoke this atmosphere of a small place as opposed to the last record, which seemed to jump around a lot. I wanted to work in quite a number of things that linked up and seemed to resonate more as an album than maybe a series of songs separate from one another. After I'd finished this screenplay, I found the songs a lot easier to write. I started looking for a producer and got Joe Ciccarelli, who'd helped me produce Salesman on the last record. Lonely Town was one of the first songs I finished that helped me get the rest of the record together. When I finished it, I thought to myself, gosh, this is like a road song, but everyone's telling you not to go to this place that you'll end up going to. I thought that was kind of a good song to start off the record. Going Southbound was pretty much a part of the screenplay that had to do with a group of urban mutants that owned a warehouse out in Barstow or a high desert area someplace, and they stole cars and turned them over and sold them to the big cities for large dollars. The guy who is in this song doesn't really know if he wants to be working here or if maybe he should just steal from the till and take off. As I got nearer the end of the record, I realized that a lot of the characters that were coming out of these songs exhibited a lot of criminal behavior and a lot of predatory mechanisms, and they really weren't people that I'd really want to hang with right off. I had this title, The Last Honest Man, that had been hanging around for a while, and I knew also that I wanted to write a song with about 4 chords in it. It was fairly easy for me to write the song after I viewed the characters on the record. It also sprang out of the screenplay, once again, from the central character going to a tent revival meeting and sitting there and listening in the crowd to this preacher go through his damnation routine. Can't Complain came from a series of notes that I'd taken on people's complaints. I didn't really know if it was going to be a song or not, and I looked at these series of complaints and they kind of grew into a song. When I finished it, I thought to myself, this needs a chorus. That's the chorus you hear in there. I think in the end it comes out to be kind of a karmic fable.